with the body. Suddenly, that made complete sense to Bruno. His body was out of whack with his spirit. He needed time to catch up. The screen in front of him changed. Now it was showing a list of statistics. Time to destination, 23 minutes. He had to use the time. He had to straighten it all out in his head. 3 weeks since he'd lost his job. 3 weeks that seemed like 3 years. Or 3 days. Or 3 hours. It made no sense. It seemed like a lifetime ago. And yet it was all so fresh. The wounds still open and raw. A month to go to the election. The wait was unbearable. You had to convince yourself that time was marching on like it always does, that any day now it would all be over and you would know the outcome. But the wait was still unbearable. And here was Bruno, suspended in the air between these 2 points. 21 minutes to destination. He imagined himself as a little man on the moving map, a crude gingerbread cutout. He plotted his journey right along that sweeping arc across the ocean. He was just tracing the line with his finger when, without warning, the screen went black. The PA system kicked into action again, and the cabin lights came up. The seatbelt signs were turned on, and the cabin crew started moving through the plane, handing out immigration cards. Blinking in the vicious light, Bruno filled his card out carefully with the ballpoint pen they'd given him. Once he'd finished, he discovered he had nowhere to put the card. He tucked it into the inside cover of his book and held the book closed in his lap. A slow descent through the clouds. There was Bruno hunched at the window, peering hopefully out at nothing. All he could see was the rain streaking the outside of the window, the grey expanse of the plane's wing ploughing on through dense white air. There was no way of knowing how close they were to the ground. Suddenly, there was green outside the window. There was wet grass rushing by, and a red and white striped windsock, and a low grey building, and the terrible sound of the wheels briefly hitting the ground and then bouncing off it again. A messy landing. The body of the aircraft swung violently to the left and then to the right, before finally steadying itself as the brakes took hold. Bruno held on to the back of the seat in front of him with his 2 hands to stop himself from falling forwards. As the plane wheeled in towards the terminal building, he had a giddy sense of elation. After all these years, he had finally done it. 30 years since that deathbed promise, and it had been haunting him ever since. Now it was done. For a moment, he imagined that he could just stay on the plane and go right back. Until it occurred to him there was nothing to go back to. His spine shuddered as he leaned over to grope for his shoes on the floor. He stuffed his earphones into the pouch on the back of the seat, unclipped his seatbelt, sat there, longing to brush his teeth. The plane jolted to a stop, and there was a big exhale as the doors were opened. Immediately, people were up and delving into the overhead compartments to retrieve their stuff. A moment or two waiting for the order to move, then they were shuffling along with their heads bowed like prisoners in a chain gang. Bruno shunted himself over to the aisle seat, heaved himself onto his feet, and stretched up to get his cabin bag down. Then he moved with the line towards the door of the aircraft. He nodded at the stewardess and stepped out into the plastic tunnel connecting the plane to the terminal building. He began the gentle climb up the walkway, following the people ahead of him. There was a strange comfort in being part of this orderly procession, like being on a pilgrimage. As he crossed over the elbow joint, it wobbled under him, as if it was a floating jetty. His stomach wobbled with it. He felt light as a balloon. He took his bag off his shoulder and let it hang down towards the floor, clutching it for ballast. Without it, he imagined he might just float up into the air. The planes come in.